Hello, everyone. We'll just get started in a few minutes here. While we're waiting for people to trickle in, open up the chat window. I'll open it up here too, and let me know where you're calling in from. So I'm here in central Canada. It's nice and sunny here today. It's actually warming up. We're not having too severe of a winter in Manitoba here. It's just around the freezing mark, so we're getting off pretty easy this winter. Not a whole lot of snow, but that's okay. At least we don't have to suffer through -40. Hello in Germany. Glad you can make it. We'll get started here right at the top of the hour. Let me just get my screen sharing here so we're ready to go. Hello in California. I'm sure it's a lot warmer in California still than it is in Winnipeg here. Glad to have you here. So hopefully you can see my screen, and we'll get started here in just a minute. So for anyone that's just joining, open up the chat window there so that we can communicate during the presentation here, and I'll get all your questions answered. All right, so we're right at the top of the hour. So today's presentation is on commissioning project management using the top-rated commissioning software and industry-best CSU processes. So you're about to get the #1 commissioning project management framework that's used on projects to avoid nightmare commissioning at the end of your projects. So like I mentioned, this presentation is meant to be interactive. So open up the chat window there. If you have any questions as we're going through the material, by all means, shoot them into the chat. I'll get your questions answered. I'll also have a Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. If you have additional questions, we'll make sure that we get all of your commissioning project management questions answered today, so you're all ready for your projects. Now, I've used the commissioning project management frameworks that we're going to discuss today on several projects. I've used these commissioning project management frameworks in the power industry, working on hydroelectric generation projects. I've used these frameworks for commissioning in the transmission world for HVDC transmission projects. I've used these same frameworks in the aerospace industry, building satellites and rockets for the Canadian Space Agency, as well as the water treatment industry, where we were expanding and upgrading wastewater treatment plant facilities not too far away from here. I'm also on the organizing committee for the Commissioning Professionals Society, where we host an annual event to discuss some of the challenges in the industry and how we can elevate the importance of commissioning on projects. It's a great event to have a lot of the world's best and brightest minds of commissioning in one room to collaborate and get ideas. It's a really good event. Now, I'm not the only one getting results with this approach to commissioning as well. We've helped several others get these same results on projects and help them complete commissioning on their projects as well. For example, Sheldon or Jonald or Kale and many others, after working with us, they all tell me the same, that this was an eye-opener. They had no idea of everything that was required for commissioning. After working with us, they tell me that this was the first commissioning system that they found that truly matches what really happens on site and actually helps them get the job done. They tell me that they knew they needed a commissioning system for years, and they talked about it for years, but they couldn't actually get it done until we helped them implement the systems and controls that they needed for commissioning. And you can go to our site, go to commissioningastartup.com. At the top, click on success stories, and you can see all the stories of people that have worked from us and that we've helped with commissioning on their projects and the success that they're having. So everyone's saying that these processes and tools are great stuff. They're helping a lot of people complete projects, and they can definitely help you on your projects too. So just to be clear, though, this is not technical commissioning. If you're looking for how to do an electrical high plot test, if you're looking for ASHRAE or NEBB building specifics, building commissioning specifics, if you're looking for HVAC test and balance, or if you're here looking for specific flushing standards for food grade piping or whatever your specific project needs are, you're not going to find any of those technical details here. That's not what this presentation is about. But technical commissioning is not actually what's missing on projects, though, is it? There's a lot of smart people working on projects, and they'll get the testing completed one way or the other. What's missing on projects is the structure that's supposed to go around the technical commissioning. What's missing are the systems and controls for commissioning to avoid a nightmare at the end. So let's look at a simple org chart. There's three main components of our project, right? We need to get it designed, we need to get it built during construction, and we need to get it tested during commissioning. Or if you've got an EPC contract and your design and construction are part of the same group, this applies as well. There's typically someone to manage the design, right? The design manager is coordinating all aspects of the design and they're following design best practices. There's always someone to manage construction. There's an entire industry that's dedicated and focused just on construction project management. But where are the project management tools and processes for commissioning? On a lot of projects, they don't even exist. There's a gap in the industry for sure, and commissioning is left at the end of projects for people to scramble and try and figure out at the end, right? So I'm sure you know what happens when the last part of your project, the most complex part, when everything has to start working together and come together as one full functional system. I'm sure you know what happens when there's no structured systems and controls to finish projects. Commissioning is a nightmare at the end to sort out, right? And maybe you've been part of projects that have turned out that way. There's a gap in the industry for sure, and the last 20% of projects often goes undefined. And it's no wonder projects are late and over budget when project teams have no systems to finish projects. And no, your spreadsheets that you've used for commissioning in the past, that's not a system to complete projects. That doesn't work anymore. There's a gap in the industry, and this is the gap that we're working to fill by helping people get the systems and controls needed for commissioning so they're able to complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. This presentation is for project managers that want an organized system to finish projects during commissioning, for project teams that need a commissioning system so they can complete commissioning much more efficiently so that you can save time and money to complete your capital projects. Without a system to complete commissioning, when commissioning is left to the end or when paper and spreadsheets are used for tracking your commissioning, projects are just gambling. There's no way to control the end of your project during commissioning. It's the Wild West, and all you can do is just roll the dice and hope for the best at the end. It's a complete crapshoot. Let's help get that fixed for you. Just like we've helped many other projects get the same systems and controls that they needed to improve their project commissioning. We help project teams determine what's required in contracts to set the stage for a successful finish during commissioning. We identify the top-rated commissioning software to use. We help you develop the industry best processes to follow so you can successfully complete projects much more efficiently during commissioning. And at the end of this presentation, if you'd like help as well to get the same systems and controls for commissioning on your projects, I'll show you how with the systems that we offer so you can save time and money during commissioning too. So if this all sounds interesting, then I'm glad you're here. So I want to share some statistics with you that are quite concerning. This is Professor Bent Flivberg. He's from the University of Oxford, and over the last few decades, he's compiled a database of over 16,000 projects. And he's also written a book. It's called How Big Things Get Done. If you haven't read it, you should check it out. It's a really good book. Professor Flivberg's research shows that only 8.5% of projects are on time and on budget. That means over 90% of projects are historically late and over budget. That's terrible. The construction industry definitely has some challenges and a terrible track record in completing projects. The complexity of completing projects during commissioning, however, is one of the main contributing factors to delays when there are no systems and controls for commissioning. A lot of projects ignore commissioning until it's too late. They're missing important aspects in contracts, or they're still using paper and spreadsheets to manually track all their checklists and completions, but these outdated methods no longer work. Today, I'm going to show you how to structure your commissioning for success so you can beat these odds, these historical odds over the last several decades, so that you can successfully complete projects. So let me know in the chat, What's been your experience on projects? Do your projects align with some of the data that Professor Flivberg has here? Have your projects struggled at the end to complete commissioning? Have your projects been late and over budget? What's been your experience? Which side of these statistics do you fall on with some of the projects that you've worked on? So now to be clear, there certainly are lots of challenges in the construction industry. And another good book to read is Built to Fail by Todd Zabel. It's a brand new book. It was released earlier this year in January. And Mr. Labelle talks about all the things wrong with the current approach to design and construction. He talks about also how to fix it with a production approach to projects. And with these challenges that exist in all phases of projects, it means that you need a robust system for commissioning so that you're ready for these challenges and to ensure that you can successfully complete your projects. We're determined to get you fully prepared for commissioning with the best tools and processes required to get the job done efficiently, and so you're ready to face these challenges that come your way inevitably during commissioning. So when I do this presentation, the first thing a lot of people ask me is they want to know, just exactly tell me how to do commissioning. Tell me what to do. Give me the checklists. Just tell me the 6-page document or standard I need to get, and I'll follow that. Just tell me how to commission an LNG plant, for example, or whatever the project specifics are. Or just tell me the best software to use. I'll get that, and I'll follow what the software tells me to do. And when I hear these questions, I already know these projects are in trouble because there's a little bit more to it than that. You're never going to find a single document that shows you the steps for commissioning. You're never going to find that standard that gives you all the steps and sequences that you need to do for your project. And you're not going to find that magic software that tells you how to commission your project because each project is different and you need specific processes and tools applied to your specific commissioning circumstances. So first, let's address the problems of what not to do for commissioning before we talk about what to do. Projects are having problems. We know this. The data is showing us that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. Projects are losing time during commissioning and they're missing in service date. And projects turn into a nightmare at the end, right? You know the commissioning jobs that are supposed to take 2 months, but then end up taking many months or years instead to complete. Everywhere you look, there's problems. Every day is a struggle. It's the kind of nightmare commissioning that makes you rethink your career decisions. Well, we help you avoid that on your project so you can get commissioning completed much more efficiently. But why is this? Why are projects struggling with commissioning? Why do some projects end up in a nightmare during commissioning at the end? We need to address these problems before I show you what to do for commissioning. There's two common mistakes that are typically made on projects. And just by fixing these two common mistakes, projects can see huge improvements. So what are these two mistakes? Mistake number one is leaving commissioning to the end of projects. We've been told for many decades that commissioning takes place at the end of projects, right? You need to finish construction and then you test everything at the end. But this is actually not true. This is, of course, what most projects do. They cross their fingers and roll their dice and hope for the best at the end, right? And maybe you've had this experience on projects, but this is what leads to problems on projects. In fact, to be successful, the commissioning process starts right at the beginning during your procurement contract processes and during your feed processes. You must make sure that contracts set the stage for successful completion of projects during commissioning. Contracts set the rules of the game. And if you don't have those defined properly, then you're going to have a tough time finishing your projects. And you must be implementing commissioning software during feed to manage your commissioning processes. When commissioning is left to the end, when there's no way to be proactive, all the problems on your project are left to the end and there's no time to recover. There's no systems-based approach to completing projects and the damage is done before on-site testing even begins. It's exactly like Stephen Covey says in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. His habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. You must be doing this on capital projects by implementing commissioning project management processes right from the start. You must have a clear vision of your project objectives right from the start, which means You must have visibility and clarity on how to complete your project during commissioning and startup, especially when you're working with such large project teams. Think about it. You want your project to be successfully completed, so you better define what success looks like during commissioning right up front in contracts. You must be planning projects from right to left instead of what most projects do is plan from left to right. This is the only way you can meet your project objectives. There's just no way to successfully complete projects unless you start with the end in mind. It's like that for everything, and projects are no different. You wouldn't go out to sea and captain a ship without a rudder or a compass, would you? So why would you do that on your projects? At the highest level, your project objectives are to deliver high quality systems on time and on budget. The only way to meet these project objectives is to achieve successful commissioning and startup. Therefore, everything you do on projects, all design and all construction activities, they must be done with the clear objective to achieve successful commissioning and startup if you want to avoid nightmare commissioning at the end of your project. And this is why it's critical to implement structured commissioning processes early in projects so that objectives are clearly defined for everyone to see and understand how their role contributes to successful commissioning and startup so that all project groups are aligned with the same objectives. So the second common mistake is still using paper and spreadsheets on projects. And many projects are still doing this. They're still using manual methods to track commissioning, but we're in the information age. And if they're still using paper and spreadsheets to track completion of complex projects, it gets out of control pretty quickly. And maybe paper and spreadsheets used to work 20 years ago, but projects are just far too complex now. There's just too many documents and too much information, and it's impossible to keep track of manually in Excel. Lots of projects still try, but it's a tough game. It's a tough way to do it. Uh, Is Excel okay? Smile. Yep, smile. We need real-time data to make informed decisions, right? We can't wait until Friday's spreadsheet is updated to get the information that we need. We need access to information right now. And successful project teams are no longer using paper and spreadsheets. I'll show you what they're using in this presentation. When projects use paper and spreadsheets, there's just no way to show everyone what success looks like during commissioning. Your random rows and columns in Excel, they're never going to define something as complex as commissioning. It's just an inefficient way to get the job done. Your spreadsheets will never give clarity to design and construction groups on what commissioning is all about. And when everyone has a different idea of how to finish projects during commissioning, it's super difficult to complete a project when everyone is going in different directions and everyone has a different idea of what success looks like during commissioning. With no clear view of what's required for commissioning, project teams spend more time talking about how they could do the work rather than actually getting the work done. And we don't need more meetings to talk about the work and talk about commissioning. We need a better way to organize our teams so we can actually get projects completed. When projects make one or more of these two common mistakes, when they're leaving commissioning to the end, or if they're still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning, we call this cowboy commissioning. When projects suffer from cowboy commissioning, the work is just inefficient, you miss your deadlines, everything is a last-minute scramble, and commissioning takes likely 3 times longer than it needed to because it's just so disorganized. And the data shows us that 9 out of 10 times, your project commissioning does not go well at the end when you take this approach. So is this making sense so far? I see some good comments. Is there any questions on what we've discussed so far? Is cowboy commissioning how you get your projects done? Let me know in the chat if you have any questions before we move on. All right. Let's start with the processes required for commissioning. And after this, then I'll review the software tools that you need to be using for commissioning as well. So these are the 3 frameworks required for commissioning project management. We require our commissioning planning frameworks. We require construction completion frameworks, and we also require our on-site commissioning and startup frameworks. These make up the integrated completions process. When you establish integrated completion processes earlier in your projects, everyone starts with the end in mind with a clear picture of what success looks like during commissioning. You reduce the risk of completing your projects during commissioning. You're able to complete commissioning much more efficiently, and you're able to save your projects millions of dollars and months of schedule by avoiding delays at the end of your project. And most importantly, we're able to deliver high quality systems that can be used for decades of reliable operation. However, when you don't have integrated completion processes, it may seem like you're making progress until on-site testing starts, right? And then nothing works. Things are missing. There's constant delays. You're losing time during commissioning and you're scrambling to get things finished at the end. You're faced with costly delays and you end up with cowboy commissioning that takes 3 times longer than it needed to. And it's an absolute nightmare to complete commissioning. Without integrated completion processes on projects, well, what do most project teams try to do? Well, they focus on design and they focus on construction, and commissioning gets forgotten about and not addressed until later in the project. They dump all the earlier design and construction problems on the commissioning guys at the end of the project, hoping they'll figure it out. But all this does is defer all your risk to the end of the project when it's much more expensive to deal with. This is, of course, what most projects do. They have their fingers crossed and they're hoping things will work at the end and that the commissioning guys will sort all of this out. But what really happens is the blame game starts. Finger pointing of what went wrong earlier in your project. And all your commissioning guys can do at that point is point out all the mistakes that were made earlier in your project. Your claims start to pile up, and I guess the approach is just to fight it out in court later, right? Lawyers are standing by with their big bills and they'll sort the mess out. But this is hardly a good approach to finishing projects, even though this is what a lot of projects do. Does the software help with ECNs? Yes, it absolutely can. Yeah, the software is quite powerful. It's not only just your commissioning software, but it really is your capital projects completion software. So it's your entire work management system to finish your capital project. And it's got quite powerful capabilities to not only deal with commissioning, track checklists, track punch items, but it manages your schedule, your entire workflows, all of your change management. It's quite the systems that are out there are quite powerful now. If you've looked at some of these systems, maybe even like 10 years ago and weren't impressed or thought, how could such a system even help me on a project? Today's systems are quite sophisticated, and really the only way to complete projects is by using these systems. So we know that there's a better way. It's when you start projects with the end in mind by implementing these integrated completion processes within software earlier in your projects. But first, why is it called integrated completions process? Well, that's because commissioning project management must be integrated into all earlier stages of projects. So during our procurement processes, we need to have commissioning aspects included in our engineering contracts, in our construction contracts, in our equipment procurement contracts, so that projects are set in the right direction right from the start before contracts are even awarded. We need to have commissioning into our design processes for our feed, for our preliminary design reviews, for our detailed design reviews. Commissioning needs to have input and be involved for sure. During our construction processes for construction quality management processes to make sure that that aligns with what we need for commissioning, and during our construction completion processes to make sure that we're actually getting what we need from construction groups and everything aligns with commissioning for a smooth completion of our project. It's the only way that projects are successful when you implement commissioning project management earlier in your projects to give your projects a strong finish during commissioning. So let's go through each framework that's on the screen here that's required to be set up on your projects and loaded within your commissioning software. I'll go through it fairly quickly because what I'll do after this presentation is I'll send you a link to this sheet with the descriptions that you can go through with a detailed explanation. You can read it and go through it a bit in a bit more detail afterwards. This hopefully that'll help you. So the 3 items here, the first one is our planning frameworks, and there's 10 components of planning. The first one is our contracts that I briefly mentioned earlier. So when we're preparing our engineering design contracts and our construction contracts, there's critical aspects that need to go into those contracts to align with how we're going to complete the project later during commissioning. And when we look at contracts, in a lot of cases, they're pretty light on commissioning details. Maybe there's some technical commissioning details in there, but there's rarely anything in there for commercial or project management aspects of commissioning. And when you're using your contracts only as a tool to get the job started and award the work, you're missing out a fundamental element of contracts as tools to actually be used to complete the project as well. So when there's nothing in there in contracts for the processes that are going to be followed, the software that's going to be used, the workflows that need to be used, and how all groups on the project are going to be interfacing with our commissioning systems to complete the projects, then yeah, it's a fight at the end because nobody's going to do it, right? If it's not in the contract, it's never going to happen. So there's critical aspects that need to go into contracts to set your project completion up for success. The next item is our feed processes. So during preliminary design reviews and during detailed design reviews, this is how we get input from the end of the project back to the beginning of the project to have that feedback loop and make sure that our design groups are working towards what's going to be required for later in the project. So I'm sure you've been part of a project that's gathered lessons learned, but a lot of projects are pretty terrible at actually incorporating those lessons learned. The lessons learned get documented and then they're quickly filed away and forgotten about and not necessarily implemented on the next project. Well, this is how that's done, is by incorporating those lessons learned back into our feed processes, by having commissioning groups, by having operations groups involved early in the project to provide that input and make sure that the beginning of the project aligns with the end of the project. There may even be more detailed design reviews that are required for specific packages for some of our control logic, our process control narratives, or HMI screen interfaces. There may be a series of workshops that are required to make sure that those design elements are coming out correctly and what's needed for the end of the project. So we don't want to miss that in our integrated completions processes. The next item is our FAT and IFAT processes. So factory acceptance testing, I'm sure you're familiar with. Some of the more common equipment testing in the factory, test a pump, run it for a few hours, measure 3 points on the pump curve. We'd all be familiar with that type of factory acceptance testing, and we've been doing that for decades. But when it comes to more complex elements such as control and protection cubicles, we must be doing integrated factory acceptance testing to test both the hardware and the software in the factory before this equipment is shipped to site. Only testing the hardware doesn't really confirm if that equipment functions properly, because software is such a fundamental element to the function of this equipment that we need to be planning to test these items earlier in our project lifecycle to make sure that both the hardware and the software function correctly in the factory before equipment is shipped to site. That's the only way to know if this stuff's going to work. Otherwise, all of your integration, all of your debugging, or in some cases, software development is taking place on site instead of when you're supposed to be actually focused on commissioning the equipment and getting the systems up and running. The next item is our project systematization, and this is one of the fundamental reasons to have commissioning teams involved earlier in the project, is we need to be taking a systems-based approach through all phases of projects. So as designs are developed and our equipment tag lists are available, it's the commissioning team's responsibility to systematize that equipment into systems and subsystems that identically align with the end of our project startup sequence. Having design align with construction, align with commissioning, and align with the very specific startup sequence that we'll be undertaking very much streamlines all phases of the project, and most importantly, ensures that everything comes together in the right sequence, in the right order, in what's required for startup. There's always only one specific startup sequence of how the plant is going to be started. You can't start your pre-treatment systems if you don't have your power island set up and operating correctly first. It's just a technical dependency, as you need your power systems up and running before you can bring your pre-treatment lines or whatever systems you're working with online. So that startup sequence really determines all the pre-activities and the order that's required for everything to line up for that startup sequence. So project systematization is an important element to have right early in your projects. The next one is our gated commissioning workflows. So how are each of our subsystems and systems going to flow through each of the workflows that we have embedded within our commissioning software? So how is subsystems going to proceed through construction completions, pre-commissioning, commissioning, startup? And what are the various stages and milestones that are going to be tracked through each of these workflows? What are the forms that are going to be signed off? What are the gates that are going to be used? And who has the authority to sign off on each of these subsystems as they pass through these workflows? So that's an important element to define very early in projects as well. So as we are going through some of these planning elements, we'll get to a certain point where we have enough of a definition and we can load this within our commissioning software. So commissioning software is an important element to get set up prior to on-site commissioning and early in projects, because the commissioning software is what models all of our commissioning processes. All of our gated commissioning workflows are loaded into software. All of our forms and certificates, everything is loaded into software to give everybody that visibility of how the project is going to be completed at the end. So this needs to be defined well in advance in contracts, telling people how the system is going to be used and what the expectations are for how they're going to interface with it. Next element, as we're going through our planning items, is we'll be able to present our sequence and schedule of our commissioning activities. So our sequence of construction completions and commissioning will align with our project startup sequence, and we'll be able to develop dates and durations to form this all into our commissioning schedule. All of this gets loaded into our commissioning software so everybody can see it, everybody has visibility on how the project is going to be completed at the end. When I say the next item here, forms and certificates, you'd be familiar with these, but I'm not referring to a paper form or a paper certificate. That was the old way of completing projects. When I'm saying forms and certificates, what I'm referring to is the gates within our commissioning software, the forms and certificates that are being used to be signed off digitally within our software to manage our gated commissioning workflows. So what are the forms that are going to be used? How are the milestones going to be tracked? And who's signing off each of these forms as our subsystems are flowing through our gated commissioning workflows? The next item, checklists and procedures, you'd be familiar with that. We've been using those for decades. But again, these are now loaded within our commissioning software. We're not having paper checklists out in the forums anymore, in the field anymore. These are being completed right within our commissioning software. So all of our checklists are loaded digitally into the software. They're all managed and tracked within the software. It's as if it's a work management system. It's assigning who's doing checklists, when they needed to be completed, and all this information is loaded right into software so that nothing gets missed. And then the last item here, not because it's the least important, but safety is an important planning element as well. The commissioning team is relied upon heavily as the equipment experts to make sure that these startups are taking place safely. And we need to be making sure that our PSSR processes are defined properly before we proceed with any of our on-site startups. We need to work closely with our HSC groups to develop our PSSR processes, that we have emergency response plans in place, and everybody's prepared in case there's an incident that occurs during some of these startups, given that it's equipment that's being started for the first time. So then the next item here is our construction completions, and there's two frameworks here. You would be familiar with punch list walkdowns, but this is the formalization of that process within our commissioning software in how are joint walkdowns being completed, how are punch items being identified, and how are they being categorized within the software. Typically, these would be tracked on an Excel spreadsheet, but the software allows so much more capability to identify punch items, track when they need to be completed, assign who actually needs to be completing them so that all the big items, all the small items, nothing gets missed, everything's tracked in software so that you can complete projects much more efficiently. And then the second framework is our subsystem static completion. And I see a lot of projects get this wrong in how they define static completion, but this is the critical milestone that really defines the goalpost for construction groups to achieve in order to be successful for commissioning. And when this is not done properly, your transition from construction to completion will be an absolute nightmare. We need to be defining our subsystem static completion and multiple static completions for each subsystem in what is specifically required for physical assets and documentation with regards to static completion. So the question always is, how do you transition from bulk construction to systems-based completion? Well, this is how you do that, is by fully defining each static completion for each subsystem to clearly define the systematization of your project earlier in your project by clearly defining each static completion for each subsystem and system, and by using software tools to keep track of each subsystem completion. Any other way that you try and do this with paper and spreadsheets is just not going to work, and you're asking for trouble. The last item here is our on-site commissioning and startup frameworks, and there's 6 components here. So you'd be familiar with some of these, pre-commissioning, commissioning, startup. Some people ask me, well, what takes place during pre-commissioning and what takes place during commissioning? And honestly, it doesn't really matter because we're going to track all of this in software and it's going to be very well defined. But you can think of pre-commissioning as the equipment level tests. You'll test the pump on its own. And then commissioning is the subsystem or systems-based test where we expect a group of tagged items to be working as a subsystem. So the pump, pipe, motor, valves, flow meter, pressure sensor, all of that group of equipment must work together as a subsystem during commissioning, and we'll test that group of equipment as a subsystem during the commissioning phase. So think about that as kind of the distinction between pre-commissioning and commissioning. We move into startup, so that's introduction of our process fluids for the first time or energization of our main circuit elements at 230 kilovolts or whatever the electrical system is. Once systems are up and running, performance verification, the period of time to do any fine tuning and make sure that the system is operating in an optimal manner now that we've completed startup. Your projects may require a trial operation if you've got a 3-day, a 30-day, or a 90-day trial operating period where systems need to operate uninterrupted for that period of time. Once that trial operation is complete, then we move into our handover where we can turn systems over to plant operators. So you can see there is quite a bit involved for commissioning to be successful, and spreadsheets just can't do that. So if you're still using spreadsheets or you're using some crappy software that your IT department has forced you to use, it means one of two things. It means either you're doing all of this stuff on the screen by brute force and manual entry, or it means you're not doing some or all of this at all on your projects. And neither of this situation is good for you because it's not good for you and your project team. You're burning out a lot of good people if this is your approach and driving them away from the industry since they're tired of the construction industry dysfunction and chaos that it causes. And it's not good for your projects because you're leaving all the risk to the end of your projects during commissioning. And we know how that turns out with 9 out of 10 projects being late and over budget. Okay, so now let's look at the software tools that you need to be using on your projects as well. And this list that's on the screen, I'll send you a copy of this after this presentation as well, so you can review it more closely. When you get the right software for commissioning, you can get rid of all that brute force effort that's required to manually track everything in spreadsheets. Everyone in your project has clarity on what success looks like during commissioning, and you're able to complete commissioning much more efficiently to save time and effort on projects and by reducing delays during commissioning. However, when commissioning software is not implemented correctly, or if you're using the wrong system, or worse, you're still using paper and spreadsheets, you have no method to complete projects during commissioning. And when you have no method to complete commissioning, what that really means is you have no method to complete your capital projects. So think about that for a moment. You have no method to complete capital projects, and that's pretty scary, isn't it? That people are allowed to start projects without having a robust method to actually finish them. And without a method to finish projects, you require a lot of brute force to get to the end during commissioning, which doesn't turn out well for 9 out of 10 projects. So what do project teams do without a method to complete projects? as we talked about, they use Excel, right? And they have their all singing, all dancing Excel macros that they've perfected over the years. And they have a few people that are manually updating spreadsheets each day, but everyone's still confused about what's required for commissioning, and things get missed and nothing works. You struggle to complete commissioning efficiently without a system to complete projects. The list on the screen shows you the 25 plus different commissioning platforms that are available that you can choose from. Now, we don't sell software. We've reviewed each of these. We've reviewed each of these on the screen, and we know which ones are the best to use. And we can show you which ones are the most appropriate to use in your industry as well. Now, these are all cloud-based systems, and something I often do hear when the discussion of software first comes up is that your IT department just isn't going to allow it. They need the system to be part of their network, right? And when I hear this from people's IT departments, I really do find this super cute because it's quite interesting that your IT department thinks that they're a version of Fort Knox, because the best systems on this list, they're all built on the most secure server systems in the world. The big companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook that have teams of thousands of people working on data security, I assure you that they have better security systems than your IT department of 6 people can put together. So while I'm sure your IT department is very proud of their security systems, you can let them know it's okay. These cloud-based systems are more secure likely than what they have. And they are going to have to keep up with the times here if they want to improve the outcome of projects. So you can just point them to the media headlines of all the corporate networks that are getting hacked on a daily basis, like Sony or Home Depot. Suncor was another one a few weeks ago, or I read that Nissan was hacked. Even this week, there was a news story about Hamilton, Ontario's government systems that were getting hacked. You certainly don't see stories in the media of Amazon's AWS networks getting hacked. So if you get the right system, you can let your IT department know that your data is safe, and probably more safe than their corporate network that they're so proud of anyways, so what I'll do after this presentation is I'll send you a copy of this list that's on the screen so you can take a closer look and you can see which software platforms that are available for commissioning. One thing I do want to note, though, is these software platforms are certainly a big piece of the equation to finish projects. They're just not the biggest piece. Completing projects during commissioning is not fundamentally about software. Software is a tool, right, to facilitate your project completions. And commissioning is complex. So naturally, setting up commissioning software is complex as well. And the processes and workflows that you create in the software for how you do your work, that is what will determine if you're successful with commissioning and successful with your software, not the software alone. Okay, so these are the two most common mistakes that are made on projects: leaving commissioning to the end of projects, or still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning. These are the two main reasons why projects are struggling with commissioning. And if you fix just these two things, you'll already have made huge improvements on your projects. We've talked about a lot of good information today. We've talked about how to structure contracts that define what success looks like during commissioning. We've talked about the commissioning processes that are required for projects to be successful. And we've talked about the software tools that are required to manage your commissioning processes. When all of these items are structured correctly on your projects, they all form a piece of the puzzle required for commissioning to be successful. And all pieces are required. You can't miss any. If you want to solve your problems with commissioning, then it's a complex puzzle to solve, which is why we offer support to help you make this all work together. However, when one or more of these pieces is missing, when your contracts are missing commercial or project management aspects of commissioning, when you're not following structured and organized processes for commissioning, or if you're not using software to manage commissioning, then project teams struggle to complete commissioning. Commissioning is incomplete and causes delays during commissioning. Design issues are discovered very late in your project during commissioning, and commissioning is a scramble at the end to complete, and always results in cowboy commissioning when projects are missing a system for commissioning. So you must make sure you've got all pieces of the puzzle in place with a comprehensive system for commissioning to avoid a nightmare at the end. Now, imagine you have a system on project that tells you exactly what is complete for construction. I mean, like everything. If every nut and bolt is installed and has been witness striped, every glanded cable is terminated correctly, all mega results are within tolerance, your system would tell you all pipes have been flushed and meet pressure and leak testing requirements. And you get to know exactly what is complete and exactly what is still outstanding for construction. How helpful would that be to know if, in fact, systems are actually ready to proceed with commissioning down to every little detail that's required? Wouldn't that be easier to know what's complete rather than being thrown out into the field to discover all the Easter eggs on your own? Of course it would. And that's what having a completion and commissioning system allows you to do. No more trial and error in the field and no more searching for the next snag that's going to hold you up during commissioning. Imagine how much easier it would be to complete commissioning if you had a system like this. So listen, without a system like this, could you tell me exactly where your project is at in just a few words, in just a few seconds? Could you do that? If you can't, that's a problem because if you don't know exactly where your project is at, and I mean every little detail, then neither does anyone else on your project. And if it's not clear to everyone working on your project where things are at, then how will everyone be able to complete your project if they don't know what's left? Now, if having a system to know what's complete and what's outstanding on your projects still isn't enough of a reason for you to get systems and processes for commissioning, then here's two more reasons of why you need to get this for your projects. There is an increasing demand for labor on projects and an increasing number of projects over the next several years. There's just a huge volume of work upcoming. You're not going to attract the skilled labor you need with your old paper and spreadsheet processes. The younger generation is demanding better ways to work that make their jobs easier, not harder. They want to be empowered to do their best work and not get bogged down with old outdated processes. You must be offering people the best tools and the best processes for commissioning if you want to get the people to work on your projects. With the amount of work on projects, they'll just go down the street and they'll go work for a more progressive group that is actually implementing these systems and controls for commissioning to make their jobs easier rather than struggle with your old outdated processes. And fundamentally, you need to be legally protecting yourself when things go wrong. And despite everyone's best efforts, there will always be things that go wrong on projects. An undocumented commissioning process makes you liable for mistakes when all you've got are bits and pieces of information that are tracked in spreadsheets. You're missing a lot of information. And if you don't have proper records for commissioning, then that's not going to end well for you during claims negotiation. You're in a bad spot legally when there's only partial records of what was complete. You need a robust system for commissioning so you have everything you need and you can protect yourself when things go wrong. So I'm sure you agree that commissioning is complex, right? And if you want it to go smoothly, the only way that's going to happen is if you've got robust systems and controls to properly manage all the details. Projects benefit from these systems and processes by having a system, a software system to manage commissioning, to complete commissioning much more efficiently and save time and money on projects. Can everyone see the value in getting these systems and processes for commissioning? Put yes in the chat if everything I've discussed here makes sense. If these systems and controls, if you can see the value, if you can see the benefit, if these are the things that you feel that you need on projects, let me know in the chat. So then the next question is, if these are the systems and processes that are needed for commissioning, how are you going to get these systems on your projects? We've reviewed the top rated software platforms to use. We've discussed the industry best processes to follow. What's your next step to get this done? What's the first thing you're going to do on Monday to get these systems and processes for commissioning? If you're serious about commissioning, then you've got a choice to make. You can do it yourself. You can try to get this all figured out on your own, and you can use trial and error on a few projects. You can try some of these processes. You can try some of these software systems, and you can see what works and you can see what doesn't. You could maybe ask one of your big consulting firms for some help because they should understand commissioning, right? Problem is they don't. They understand technical commissioning from a design perspective, but they don't understand the commercial and project management aspects of commissioning. It's not their role. They understand the technical design aspects. So you're not going to get you what you need from your big consulting firms, and you won't even realize it until it's too late to recover. You can select software on your own and you can try to get it set up, and you can attend a few software demos, which never really get you to the nuts and bolts of what these software systems do and never really tell you what you need. You can try to cut through all the sales jargon, and you may or may not end up with the right software. You may or may not get it configured for what you need. And in the end, your team might outright refuse to use it. They don't see the value. It's not set up properly. It's hindering them in what they're doing in their day-to-day activities, and they hate it. And they end up going back to their paper and spreadsheets that they love so much, right? And if you try this on your own, you might still get stuck with the way it's always been done, because I understand it's hard to make change. The construction industry is stuck in its ways and often seems fine with the status quo, doesn't it? There are a lot of industry norms in the construction industry that are going to bog you down, and a lot of hoops to jump through to make this happen on your projects if you want to go do this on your own. Or instead, you can get our support to make this much easier for you and get the systems and processes you need for commissioning and get it set up fast so you can start using software right away. With our support, you get systems and processes for commissioning in a matter of weeks. It doesn't have to take years of trial and error to learn, or it doesn't have to take months of red tape and corporate bureaucracy to jump through all these hoops. With our help, you get what you need now, so your projects are set up for the best chance of success. You can have confidence you're getting the right software for your projects and know you're getting the most efficient setup, customized with your exact project needs. You also get expert commissioning guidance from someone that you know has practical commissioning experience to help your project succeed and steer you in the right direction. All of this so you can avoid a commissioning nightmare at the end of your projects. Commissioning doesn't have to feel so daunting when you get support to set your projects up for commissioning success. And you really shouldn't be starting a project until you first have a system to be able to finish it during commissioning. Okay, so there's 3 ways that we help you with commissioning, and I'll go through each one of them here. Our first option is our Commissioning Academy training program. This is a great option if you want to learn on your own everything that's required for commissioning project management. Our Commissioning Academy training program gives you all the details of every step that's required, everything that we've discussed today, right from the beginning of projects during contract development and feed processes, all the way through every stage of the process to handover to plant operators. You get everything you need for commissioning project management, including the software to use, the commissioning processes to follow, and how to get your systems and controls set up for commissioning success. This is a great option if you want to learn commissioning project management and see how all pieces of the commissioning puzzle fit together so that you can successfully complete projects during commissioning and avoid a nightmare at the end of your projects. Our second option is our commissioning software setup services. Companies need help getting commissioning software set up on their projects, and maybe you've talked about it for a few years. You know that you need to upgrade your systems and you've explored a few options, but you're still stuck with paper and spreadsheets and it never seems to actually get done. Or maybe you've got a new commissioning group and new processes to set up, and you're establishing system and processes for the first time. It's a lot easier when you get our help to do that. We have a preferred software platform that we like to use, that we've worked with several times, and we know that it works. And we can get you set up with the best software as well. And honestly, I've tried to find a second option that's comparable, but I just haven't been able to find it. There's always something I find that doesn't seem to make sense. And I'm not sure why anyone would choose a software that requires a workaround right from the start. So we'll get you set up with the best software that actually meets your project needs. We'll get all your checklists written and digitized into software. Or if you have existing checklists that you need digitized, we help you develop all your commissioning workflows and all your approval processes. Everything's loaded and built right into the software. You get a turnkey software system that is fully configured and ready to use on your projects. And then you also get a custom training package to roll this out to your team and tell them how to use the new system. So you can train everyone on how to use your new system, which gives you assurance that people will adopt your new way of working and actually start getting value from the new systems right away. We make getting commissioning software much easier than it's ever been, rather than trying to figure this out on your own. And our third option is our custom commissioning consulting services, where we take a deeper dive into your commissioning strategy, which includes developing construction contracts that align with commissioning. When we do our post-mortem reviews on a lot of projects, the root cause of most nightmare commissioning, it always comes down to bad contracts. When you're preparing construction contracts, there is one important item that must be included. And if you don't get this item defined properly in your construction contracts, then you are pretty much guaranteed to be stuck in commissioning hell at the end of your projects. When we do help people with claims negotiations at the end of projects, we usually find the root cause of issues is with bad construction contracts that are missing this one important thing for commissioning in contracts. So if you want to get your contracts correct to set commissioning up for success, book a call and we'll show you what's missing in contracts that's hurting your projects and causing your commissioning to be a nightmare. A lot of project teams get this wrong when contracts are pretty light on commissioning details, but it's actually not their fault because it's pretty difficult to know what should go into contracts, into construction contracts for commissioning years before commissioning even starts. Contracts are prepared 2, 3, 5, sometimes 10 years prior to commissioning, on-site commissioning even taking place. So that's a pretty tough thing to do to get that right that many years in advance. But this is why we help you with this, to get your contracts correct years in advance so that you know that commissioning is set up for success. So these are the three ways that we help you with commissioning. And if you're figuring this stuff out for the first time, then these three options are your best approach to make sure you're successful with commissioning. And these three options give you the lowest risk approach to complete your capital projects. What will happen if you don't get our support? Well, your project will incur more risk of being late and over budget with nightmare commissioning at the end, just like 9 out of 10 projects end up, right? The odds are stacked against successful project completion. So your lowest risk approach is to get our help to de-risk completion of your projects and give your projects the best chance of success during commissioning. There's always going to be challenges on projects. That's inevitable, but commissioning doesn't have to be so daunting when you get help to figure this stuff out. And we're here to help you succeed with commissioning and give your projects the best chance of success with commissioning. Our support options are perfect for individuals that want to understand fast how to manage commissioning in the best possible way and not have to take 10 years to learn commissioning project management on their own. Our Commissioning Academy program gives you a head start in your career to give you the skills you need so you can hit the ground running on your next project. Our support options are also perfect for companies that need to implement commissioning software, but just haven't been able to get it done. If you need to transition to better software systems to manage commissioning, then this is a good option for you. Or if you're setting up a new commissioning department or getting set up on a new project and need to build out your commissioning processes and software, this is a good option for you. For companies that need to make sure procurement documents include everything for commissioning and contracts and want to make sure construction contracts are correct before being awarded, our consulting services are a great option for you too, to make sure there are no commissioning gaps in your construction contracts that will cause costly mistakes later during commissioning and avoid the common mistakes that are made in most contracts when it comes to commissioning that cost projects a lot of money to fix later. As you already know, 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. So fixing your commissioning problems with systems and controls for commissioning will also fix your project completion processes once you have a system to complete projects during commissioning. So if you want a system to complete projects and avoid nightmares during commissioning, we help you with this with the three options that we offer. And here's how you can get support. Go to learncsu.com and you'll see the three options that we just discussed. Click on the big purple button that applies to you and fill out the next steps. It's super simple. Go to learncsu.com right now and get the support you need to succeed with commissioning of your capital projects. Now, you may not be the decision maker on projects, and that's okay. Systems and controls for commissioning might sound like a good idea for you, but of course, you're going to need to talk to others within your organization That's often the case, right? There's lots of people working on projects. So there's two things you can do. We can meet first, just you and I, if you like, and I'll give you everything you need to discuss with your manager or supervisor. So you have everything you need and you're fully prepared. That's a good way to prepare for your internal discussions. Or you can invite your manager or your supervisor to the meeting as well, and we can all discuss together on how to get your project set up for commissioning success, whichever you prefer. We can meet first before to discuss with others, or bring your manager and we can all discuss together on the same call. Either way, go to learncsu.com and click on one of the big purple buttons to get started with the option that is best for you. What I've noticed is you can literally change the entire trajectory of your projects when you implement these systems and controls for commissioning, because you're able to start your projects with the end in mind and give your projects the best chance of success during commissioning and avoid a nightmare at the end of your projects. And there's a reason that people come to us for commissioning, because we've seen what works and what doesn't. We have certainty in what we're doing, and people want proven processes that actually work, that produce results in the field. So if you're serious about completing capital projects during commissioning, go to learncsu.com and select the option that's best for you. We'll give you the knowledge and expertise you need to succeed with capital project commissioning. We've finally made it easy for you to get the support you need for commissioning. There's no longer any reason for commissioning to be the reason that projects fail. Go to learncsu.com right now and get the support you need so commissioning can be successful at the end of your projects. Okay, so we're finishing basically right on time here in an hour. That's great. I do have some time for some Q&A. So if there's any other questions, shoot them into the chat and I'll make sure that I get your questions answered. While you're putting your questions in the chat, there are some common questions that I often get during this Q&A. So I'll just run through those as I watch for your questions there. So people commonly ask me at this point, well, why do I need commissioning software? Our spreadsheets have been working just fine for us. And I say that that's likely because you're relying 100% on people, since you don't have processes or tools. And that's actually not going to get you very far. When you only have part of what's required for commissioning to be successful, when your good people retire or if they move on to another project, then you're not going to have much left except for your old outdated spreadsheets that nobody understood in the first place anyways. And you're certainly not going to be able to take on any more work, because it's just not possible these days to find the skilled commissioning people that you need. You need all pieces of the puzzle if you want commissioning to be successful. And you'll continue to struggle if you want to rely 100% on people and burn them out with the chaos at the end of projects. Which software do you recommend the most? We do have a preferred software that we like to work with. It does depend a little bit on the industry that you're working on. So by all means, book a call and we can have a chat and talk about what might be best for your projects and your industry on what software would be the best one to use. Sometimes I get asked, why do I need commissioning project management? Isn't this all covered when you get your PMP, when you get PMP certified? And when you look at PMI's information, it's pretty light on details to finish capital projects. PMI covers on how to start a project, and it briefly covers quality management, but there's nothing that PMI has on the processes or tools that are required for commissioning project management. The stuff we help people with isn't included in PMP. And I think this is why there's so much confusion about commissioning, is because finishing capital projects during commissioning just isn't taught to project management and isn't well understood in the industry. Systems and controls for commissioning are the missing part of what's required to actually finish capital projects. So if you're planning to get your PMP, that's still a good thing, but you're still missing how to finish projects, which is really the most fundamental part, isn't it? People ask me, does this apply to all industries? And remember, there is a distinction between technical commissioning and commissioning project management. All projects, of course, do technical commissioning differently. Every project has unique technical requirements, right? The breakers to close and the valves to open, these are always project specific. The technical commissioning aspects are always different, even for two projects within the same industry. However, the processes and software for commissioning project management, these apply to all industries, regardless of the technical details. The same risk mitigating steps that we've discussed today need to be taken on all capital projects in all industries. It's always the same risk-based approach to manage commissioning so that your project-specific technical testing goes well. So the commissioning project management principles we use, these apply to all complex projects. If it's process systems or energy systems, all complex projects involving mechanical, electrical, and automation equipment that needs to work together at the end of your project as one system. It all applies here. So to answer the question, yes, these commissioning project management principles do apply to all industries. Is this seminar recorded and can I access it later in the week? Yes, it is. Absolutely. I will send you a link to this recording afterwards. I do this presentation next week as well. So if you'd like to join or if you'd like to bring others and see this presentation, we can certainly go through it as well. Once you get the replay, you can share that with others that need to understand this stuff as well. One other question people sometimes ask me is, can they do this later? This all sounds good, but they're busy. They don't have time to do this right now. And I totally get it. Projects life is definitely busy. I understand and agree that you are busy. You're probably getting several hundred emails a day, and just like everybody working on projects. But that's why we're here. That's why we've created this, because we know you're busy and we want to make this as easy as possible for you so you can stay focused on your projects. So don't leave this until it's too late and the damage is already done on your projects and your career. You need to get some urgent items in place for commissioning now if you want commissioning to go well later. So go to learncsu.com and get the help you need so you don't end up leaving this too late and the damage is already done before on-site commissioning even starts. All right, so those are some of the questions I often get. I hope that helps. I don't see any more questions. Oh, there's one that popped up. Can this software be implemented in the middle of a project? Absolutely. It's never too late. Sometimes even once commissioning has started on site, I've seen software get implemented. We prefer to get it implemented at least before on-site testing starts, but if designs are already being completed, if construction phase is well underway, then now is definitely the time to get software set up right now before on-site commissioning starts, so that you can avoid a mess later. So definitely a good question. Okay. Awesome. So I don't see any more questions coming up. So let's end it there for today. Go to learncsu.com, click on the big purple button that applies to you, and we'll get you set up and ready for commissioning. Watch your email over the next few days because I will send you a few links that we've discussed. So I will include a link to this replay so you can share it with others and get them on board with how all of this works. I'll send you a link to the software list that we reviewed so you can review the list of platforms that are available and check it out in a bit more detail. I'll send you a link to the process flowchart that we reviewed so you can review each stage of the commissioning process and make sure you're not missing anything on your projects. And I'll also send you the link that's on the screen here to our 3 support options so you can get the support you need to make sure your commissioning is set up for success. So to conclude, I just want to thank everybody for joining. Lots of good comments, lots of good questions. I hope you found this helpful and I hope to hear from you soon. Best of luck on your projects and stay safe.